Thanks for your company this afternoon. Now, in less than 24 hours, major government policies from tax systems to education and ensuring your safety on the roads will kickstart. Top among these policies is a sweeping tax reform that abolishes the COVID-19 levy, consequently reducing the effective VAT rate from 2.9 to 20% from January 1st, 2026. Aside from this, there is, however, going to be an increase in water and electricity tariffs as part of the multi-year tariff adjustment approved by the Public Utility Regulatory Commission. James Aveji takes a look at the key policies in the following report.
The John Mahama government will begin the second year of its second term with a raft of tax reforms as announced by Finance Minister Dr. Kasiel Atuforsen in the 2026 budget presentation in Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to reassure the people of Ghana that at the minimum, the following will happen as part of the VAT Act. Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, COVID levy will be abolished. The effective VAT rate will be reduced. The punitive cascading effect of the GET Fund and NHIS levy will be removed. VAT flat rate will be removed. And a unified VAT rate will be implemented. The VAT registration threshold will be increased to exempt small and micro businesses, and compliance will be improved through public education, awareness creation, and the introduction of fiscal electronic devices will be deployed.
Following the passage of the tax reform bill, the much talked about COVID-19 levy, which was described by the NDC in opposition as a nuisance tax, stands abolished effective Thursday, January 1, 2026. This will consequently reduce the effective VAT rate from 21.9% to 20%, resulting from the decoupling of the GET Fund and the NHI levy. Beyond the tax cut, water and electricity will, however, see a 15.92% and 9.86% increment respectively. Elsewhere, no broken down vehicle is expected to stay on the road beyond an hour as the government seeks to implement a swift towing of all sport vehicles under the amended Road Traffic Regulations Act to improve road safety across the country. In education, government will also begin the implementation of free tertiary education for all persons with disability. But beyond January 1, government is also expected to roll out an e-visa policy, digitize government services, expand the LEAP project and other social programs. The question, however, is how the John Mahama-led administration intend to use these interventions to expand Ghana's economy and better the lives of citizens in 2026 and beyond. James Aveji, Joy News.
And we can now listen to Joy News' head of research, Isaac Kofi-Adjei, on how significant this reduction is for the average Ghanaian household, and if government can still meet its revenue target or risk widening the fiscal gap with the abolishing of the COVID-19 levy and reduced effective rates.
This new reform of the VAT rate is expected to reduce the effective VAT rate from 21% to about 20%. So essentially, if you do the math, consumers are expected to save close about 2% or 1.9% in terms of how much they pay as effective VAT rates. If you look at the current VAT system that we have, which the current government has called it draconian and a bit, distorted, in the sense that there is an element of tax on tax where if you buy an item, worth about 100 cedis, what you are currently doing is that you're paying, NHIL 2.5%, COVID-19 1%, and then you pay GET Fund of also 2.5%. This tax handle, in terms of how much has been deducted in terms of taxes added to the original price of the product before a VAT of 15% is charged. Now, with this new reform, that approach is going to change. This particular government has done a number of, tax abolishments. For the first one we saw was the betting tax, and then also the e-levy, which cost the government about 3 billion cedis. if you look at how much this will impact the revenue, according to estimations done by the Ghana Revenue Authority and figures presented to the IMF, the expectation is that the removal of the COVID-19 levy and then also the folding of the NHIL as well as the GET fund levies from the VAT system is expected to cost the government some 5.3 billion cedis. So government, by doing this, is forgoing about 5.3 billion cedis. But the government is banking its hopes on compliance, which they believe, if it's able to go up, could bring in some 1.6 billion cedis.
Now, the government has made an early payment of $709 million Eurobond, a move officials say strengthens the nation's fiscal credibility and ongoing economic recovery. In a statement released on Wednesday, the Ministry of Finance confirmed the payment was processed on December 30, ahead of its due date. Finance Minister Dr. Kasiel Atoba-Forson described the settlement as a critical milestone in Ghana's debt management strategy. Caleb Zeblem with our research desk explained how settling the $709 million Eurobond ahead of schedule impacts Ghana's debt sustainability.
Yeah, the government so far has made $1.4 billion in Eurobond payments. And remember, somewhere in 2022, the government defaulted on our external debt, which means we couldn't pay the debt. So that's why we saw the IMF program, and they helped us restructure some of our debt. So after the restructuring of the debt, we came out with payment plans that every year we'll pay a certain amount of money to the restructured debt. That's the external front, so our Eurobonds. And this year, the government was supposed to pay around $700 million. But then today, from the Finance Ministry, they say they've paid an extra $790 million. So this brings the total to $1.4 billion. Now, if you can go to the next slide, you see that next year, the government is supposed to pay about $1.4 billion, so $1.3 billion in the entire year. And then this year, this for 2025, we're supposed to pay around $700 million. So the government this year has exceeded what they are supposed to pay for Eurobond holders. And then the question might be, why is the government paying more this year? Well, if you look at the external front, gold prices are doing very well. So right now, the government has more forex coming in. And then because the government also did some strict fiscal responsibility measures, they've managed to make some savings on the domestic front. And remember, when you're paying your external debt, you take cedis, the central government or the Ministry of Finance will take cedis from revenue, go and put it with the Bank of Ghana, and the Bank of Ghana will convert that cedi to dollars and pay your external debts for you. But because now gold prices are very high, we have excess dollars with the Bank of Ghana, and because the Finance Ministry have done some savings, they've taken more cedis to the central bank, and because of the gold prices and all of that, we can pay our external debts before time. So which is why this year, we are seeing that the Finance Ministry has paid more, and if you go to the next slide, in $790 million in the last day of the year, that's 31st December 2025. So instead of taking this payment to next year, where we are paying $1.3 billion, we've taken half of it this year. So next year, instead of $1.3 billion, the government will have to pay about $600 million, which means more savings for the government and then more debt management strategies going forward.
Now, every day, millions of Ghanaians step into traffic, markets and schools and breathe in danger. Experts say a small missing engine part in thousands of vehicles is quietly polluting the air and making people sick. It is called the catalytic converter. Many cars no longer have it, and the cost is paid with human lives. In this special report, JoyNews' Mahmoud Mohammed Nuruddin investigates why some drivers fail to replace damaged catalytic converters and how others knowingly remove them or sell them for money, worsening Ghana's air pollution crisis.
Kumasi wakes up early, cars move, markets open, life begins. But behind the noise is something more dangerous: dirty air from vehicles releasing harmful fumes straight into the city. At Swami Magazine, Ghana's largest auto repair hub, the problem is known. Mark Opoku is an exhaust welder who has worked here for over 10 years. He says drivers regularly ask him to remove their catalytic converters.
Converter We do not intentionally remove the converter. When it expires, it breaks down and chokes the engine. When this happens and you start the engine, water does not come out from the back. And when you are driving, the car does not move. That is why we remove it. When the converter has not expired, but the car consumes a lot of oil, the oil cannot pass through it. Instead, it remains inside because the holes it is supposed to pass through are very small. The converter is designed for only vapor and smoke to pass through it. When oil passes through the same road, it blocks the passage, causing the car not to pull. We are supposed to replace the converter after removing it, but because of the high cost, we often leave it out.
Mark says most vehicles that came with converters no longer have them.
Cars bear 100 a converter a boom which make say bear 20 per any.
If we pick 100 cars to check whether they have converters installed, we find fewer than 20 cars with converters. Most cars in Kumasi do not have converters installed, especially taxis. If you check 100 taxis, you find only about 5 that have converters. Even among those 5, they are usually newer models, 2025. It is alleged that Nigerians buy converters, hence many drivers sell them even when they are not faulty.
Well, the full story airs tomorrow right here on Joy News. Now, it was introduced with fanfare, celebrated as Ghana's bold step towards cutting carbon emissions. But 1 year after its passage, the emission levy disappeared, repealed quietly, almost silently, leaving behind more questions than answers. Now, new research suggests it may never have worked in the first place. Clean Air Beat reporter Michael Ashali has more in the following report.
The Health Effects Institute estimates that at least 32,000 people die every year in Ghana from exposure to fine particulate matter. The biggest sources of this toxic mix are burning and tailpipe emissions. By 2018, Accra's Central Business District alone was emitting more than 4 million tons of carbon dioxide, levels which Director of Transport of the Accra Metropolitan Assembly, Alex Johnson, says were far beyond what planners had anticipated.
2018, when we first launched our climate action plan, the projection was to achieve a reduction that sees emission levels at about 4 million metric tons in 2035. But by 2021, when Google made some data available, Environmental Insights Explorer made some of these data resources available, we realized that we were even already clocking 4 million metric tons emissions within a certain sector of the Accra space, especially towards the CBD.
Environmental scientist Dr. Raphael Aku says the evidence back then already pointed clearly to the sources.
We have discovered that there are about 4 to 6 major sources that are polluting the air in Accra. It includes traffic, waste burning, dust particles, even construction, among other things are contributing. Even sea salt, because Accra is on the ocean.
Government's response was the Emissions Levy. The Emissions Levy Act passed in December 2023 and implemented in February 2024 imposed annual charges of 75 to 300 cedis on petrol and diesel vehicles based on engine size. Government said the levy would cut emissions and fund environmental action. But even as the levy took effect, skepticism followed quickly from drivers on the road.
The government could have engaged the ordinary citizens on this as well. tax.
Passengers, we are passenger.
We as passengers have little to say on this issue because we have no choice.
Levy, no, I too much.
From lawmakers in Parliament,
they have signed on to an IMF conditionality which compels government to raise the threshold of the revenue as a percentage of GDP to a certain level. And so they are looking at every means to tax the people of Ghana.
And even from clean air advocates who questioned the levy's real intention.
If you want to use emissions levy as a tool to reduce pollution, the way you target it is different. What I think we were trying to introduce in Ghana, in my humble opinion, and this is my personal opinion, I thought was more of a revenue generation tool.
Many argue that the levy, although framed as an environmental measure, functioned more as a revenue pipeline than a true deterrent to pollution. So when Parliament repealed the levy in 2025, it came as little surprise.
Emissions tax repeal bill. So emissions levy is gone.
Atmospheric scientist Dr. Jan.1st, who has spent years tracking Ghana's pollution trends, set out to measure the levy's real impact during the single year it was in force.
We didn't find a whole lot of specific policies that were targeting air pollution, but we did find things like this emissions levy, which wasn't maybe designed purely to tackle air pollution, but had it as one of the possible co-benefits.
Using satellite data and ground-level sensors, Dr. Westerveld found the levy delivered almost nothing. Transport-related pollution remained virtually unchanged, with no measurable drop in fine particulate matter, even outside the Harmattan season.
That's right. We do have what we're calling the Gridded Africa Surface Pollution Dataset, or GRASP for short. And it also goes back all the way to the year 2005 up to the end of 2024. We compared February 2024 through the rest of 2024 to previous years. So we compared February 2024 to February 2023 to February 2022 to February 2021, etc. That way, you can sort of control for the fact that there is seasonal changes in the PM 2.5. The other thing that we did is we looked at it in different months. So it's not just February, it's all the months of the year that, so we looked at, for example, June of 2024 and compared that to June of 2023, 21, 22, etc. So we were able to actually look at non-Harmattan periods as well to see if there was any changes that would be completely independent of the Harmattan. And even in those cases, there wasn't any statistically significant changes in PM 2.5 that could be attributed just to the emissions levy.
Over the period, vehicle numbers continued to rise, fuel consumption did not slow, and no behavioral shifts were recorded among drivers. On the streets of Accra, some drivers told us that the levy never changed how they drove, serviced their engines, or thought about pollution.
There
was no need for the levy. The smoke is nothing bad.
The government to give our money back because they have cheated us. You see somebody coming back, the way the smoke is coming in, you yourself, you regret.
Government would die.
How can you be able to say that you are collecting air pollution tax? How? No.
Meanwhile, tailpipe emissions in Accra have remained high and largely unchanged for nearly 20 years, according to Associate Professor of Environmental Health Sciences, Dr. Raphael Ako.
What we have found out is that the proportion that is coming from traffic remains the same. It hasn't changed over the last 20 years. So how much traffic is contributing to air pollution in Accra has remained stable.
Fresh research from PSS Urbania, led by Dr. Joseph Ayitio, is now helping to map pollution hotspots across part of Accra, revealing where exposure is highest.
Across the 30 MMDAs, the very common causes of pollution, which I'm sure would not be shocking to you, had to do with transportation, was a major contributor to the kind of quality, poor quality that emitted, that contributes to poor air quality. And then burning of firewood and open burning of rubbish was another major activity that was identified across most of the local authorities. Across the 52 sites, most sites had levels below the EPA and then the World Health Organization levels, except 4 major sites. And these were Ayawaso North, and particularly in Ayawaso North and Ladade Kotopon municipality.
Researchers believe that if Ghana targets the right sources, particularly traffic, burning and waste management, significant pollution reductions are achievable.
Those responsible can target these 2 sources: traffic, biomass burning, and then waste burning. When we do that, we can cut down air pollution level by 50% or even more than 50% in Accra.
So certain African countries have put into place, restrictions on how old and how sort of polluting the vehicle that you can import from Europe or the US or Canada or another wealthy country. They've put some restrictions on that to help reduce the local pollution from these sort of dirty old cars. Other things would be enhancing the level of public transportation. This would mean buses, trains, even things like bicycles and electric scooters and all those kinds of things. Those are sort of the new emerging frontier of clean travel. And then the last thing that I would say really has nothing to do with vehicles, but cleaner cooking fuels. And the challenge with the cleaner cooking fuels is it has to be affordable. As I was kind of mentioning earlier, folks that are cooking with wood or charcoal are doing so because it's cheap.
The repeal of the emissions levy ends a chapter, but not the crisis. Clean air advocates say a new conversation must begin, not about taxing emissions, but about actually reducing them. For JoyNews, I am Michael Ashale. This story was a collaboration with New Narratives. Funding was provided by the Clean Air Fund, which had no say in the story's content.
Now, away from that, a joint study by researchers at the Koforidua Technical University and the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology has uncovered disturbing levels of cyanide and lead in cassava produced from reclaimed gold mining fields in Paming and Jadam in the eastern region of Ghana. This startling finding raises concerns over the health risk on consumers, especially on how safety checks are overlooked in unprocessed foods and raw crops like cassava before reaching the markets and our dining tables. Josephine Sego reports on the implications to cassava-based delicacies, especially fufu.
Illegal small-scale mining, known as galamsey, has left many major water sources polluted, farmlands destroyed, forest reserves depleted, whilst wildlife habitats struggle for sustenance. This menace has left Ghana's ecological landscape on its feet, at the mercy of reclamation.
We are not even having tailings dams that will contain the residue from mining. And so, by poisoning the water sources, we are poisoning the entire farming area and where we live. Wherever these rivers and streams go, we are spreading contaminants across.
Land reclamation has become the major pathway to covering mined pits, replanting trees and rehabilitating degraded farmlands to save community ecosystems. Despite these efforts and intended investments, the effect of illegal mining cannot be entirely extinguished and subsided. When the pits are covered and trees are planted, what happens to the toxic substances such as mercury and cyanide trapped in the soil?
So this cassava plantation looks like a thriving farmland, but what we cannot see are the dangers beneath the soils these cassava trees are standing in. In many areas where farming has already begun on lands that have been reclaimed from illegal mining, a looming danger stares at farmers, consumers, and products of cassava. With a yield of an estimated 22 million metric tons in 2019, cassava is undoubtedly one of Ghana's most important root crops. Two communities in the eastern region, Paming and Jadem, have a long history of illegal small-scale mining and also are notable growers of food crops, including cassava. Reclamation efforts reached the enclaves, healing the soil on the surface for farmers to plant again. However, chemicals used for mining remained for years, if not decades, in the soils, diffusing into cassavas grown within these areas, as revealed by research. The results of this research struck an unsettling chord.
The general consumers must be made aware to know that it is important to know where you are sourcing your cassava from. After our cassava,
using standard laboratory methods, the team compared cassava from reclaimed mining sites and non-mining fields, testing for moisture, fat, protein, heavy metals, and cyanide. Their findings reveal that just as nutrients, including fat and protein levels, were high, so were the toxins. Levels of heavy metals, including lead, exceeded safe limits in cassava grown on reclaimed mine lands. The effect of these metals in the human body are fatal.
They are very toxic. Mostly they are dense such that they become difficult to be removed or washed away by water. So if somebody consumes it, that means they have the tendency to undergo oxidation, breaking apart to produce free radicals. These free radicals can cause cancer. They interact with human body. Some can even result in neuropathy diseases or neurodysfunctioning. Sometimes, in the case of infants, you can talk about constipation, anemia, fatigue, and all these are symptoms that occur. And sometimes, in the case of children, they can even have some mental issues and some diseases like the dysfunctioning of the respiratory system.
At Paming, a middle-aged farmer, Samuel Kwabena Owusu, has been on his farm for 18 years, watching it reproduce abundant yield until galamsey emerged in the community.
But I started from the no problem there, but they do baby no. At
first, I didn't experience this. Now, I sometimes stop planting until after 5 months because if we rush, we may suffer from the chemicals they use. Before the galamsey, we produced a lot of cassava. We used to harvest big quantities, but now our harvests are small and we are witnessing the side effects in quality and quantity of the cassava we produce.
Owusu's plight ties with the research findings, exposing the deep-rooted character of illegal mining, not only in farms and on farmers. Farm produce gets to market across the region. Cassava in Ghana is consumed in different ways and forms. Whilst it could be boiled and pounded into fufu, or grated into powder for kokonte, or fried into gari, consumers may not be escaping the Repeal effect of contaminated cassavas. Raw agricultural produce like cassava do not routinely go under test by Food and Drugs Authority. So, at food joints and homes, regular customers consume food crops without suspecting.
We don't know where they bring the raw crops. We only care about the food, and now we are frightened to get disease.
Which is going to affect me economically because I do budget that this is what I'm going to buy. If I'm going to buy my gari, gari may not be as expensive as other foods that may be. So it's going to affect me, but I just have to stop eating safety for my own health.
We can stop eating it entirely. Maybe I will reduce my intake because almost every delicacy in Ghana has a touch of cassava, and this devastating news is frightening.
But in all this, will the lands ever be free from these toxins? And will the food be rid of the chemicals ever? Dr. Jan.1st implies that the longer the reclamation period, the safer the land, but calls for a ban on farming in these areas within such periods. Dr. Jan.1st recommends that other variants of cassava can be cultivated to produce double yields to make up for the losses.
As part of even our recommendation, we recommended that future studies should look at how best these lands can be put to use after their reclamation. But based on their findings from their study, we realized that the longer the reclamation period, the lower the levels of cyanide and that of lead, which implies that how long the reclamation period is becomes very good for cultivation of crops. It's important we also look at it from the safety and the quality side, not just making the foods available. Talking about availability, there are other cassava crops, there are varieties that could equally be cultivated that can give higher yields even per acre or per hectare, which will also help to secure the food security that Ghana is trying to achieve.
The study forces Ghana and the agricultural sector to confront a difficult question of what alternatives are available for the country.
And our food safety something authority. Yes. So at least for them, if there are ways that they could put in place to ensure that the food we eat are safe from these metals, I think it's going to help most of us.
Meanwhile, environmental advocate Erastus Asaridonko has warned that the detrimental effects are not far from home. He challenges authorities to take decisive actions.
That we are playing with fire. When it comes to contaminating our food chain, it is happening and it is real. I have seen some government ministers trying to downplay or belittle this practice. But this is a very dangerous practice we are joking with, we are toying with. If we do not end cyanide leaching by small-scale illegal miners across the country, we are in for a very dangerous precedent.
Whether Ghana chooses stricter monitoring, improved reclamation, or crop diversification, one thing is clear. This is a critical national issue for reflection.
And now let's step into politics, where fresh public polls from the Global Info Analytics have revealed that Education Minister Haruna Idrisu has maintained top spot as favorite for a potential flag bearer for the National Democratic Congress, NDC. The data polled 8 candidates, including the Vice President, Professor Jan.1st, the party chairman, Isiedu Nketia, Finance Minister, Dr. Kasiel Atoforsen, among others. This last poll for the year 2025 did not focus only on the NDC, but the NPP as well, where Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia is leading the pack of 5 aspirants going to the polls on January 31st. From our research desk, Caleb Zeblem is here. Caleb, let's start off from the NDC, where the data shows that Haruna Idrisu is leading by 29.8%.
So in September, Global Info did a similar poll. And we know this whole year they've been doing polls almost every other month. And in September, Haruna Idrisu was leading. And if you look at the polls for almost the whole year, Haruna has been
leading, yeah.
So in September, Haruna was leading, followed by Isiedu Nketia, Atoforsen, and then Julius Deborah. That was the top 5. But then if you look at the current poll, we now see it's still Haruna Idrisu. But then Atoforsen has overtaken Isiedu Nketia. And then we know how the economy is faring and how people are praising the finance minister for the exchange rates and all of that. So this might be feeding into why Atoforsen is currently in second position. But then again, earlier we didn't see Jane,
the Vice President.
But then now she's in the lead. She's top 5. She's in the top 5. So we have Haruna Idrisu,
Ato Forsen, Asedi Nketia, Professor Nana Jane, and then Julius Deborah. So these are the leading contenders for the NDC. But then the issue is that the NDC has not opened their flag bearer race yet. So sometimes when you're trying to guess who is leading in the race, some people might not even contest the same place. So Global Info did some permutations, and they took out Haruna Iddrisu and then Jane Nana. And once we take out those two people, we see that Ato Forsen is in the lead. So he's leading, followed by the current chairman, Asedi Nketia, then Julius Deborah, before Okujeto. So once you take out Haruna Iddrisu and the current vice president, we have Ato Forsen leading the race. Again, if you do other permutations and you take out so many other candidates, we see Ato Forsen
still leading,
followed by Asedi Nketia, and then Joshua Alabi before Eric Opoku. So the poll tells us that Haruna Iddrisu and Ato Forsen are the leading favorites for the NDC grassroots and the NDC candidates. But then if you move to the MPP now, and again, throughout the year, we see the former Vice President, Dr. Bawumia, leading the NDC MPP race, and followed by Kennedy Japan. Now, this is interesting because throughout the year, we see Kennedy inching up a bit, Bawumia reducing, and then vice versa. So before this poll, Kennedy was a bit higher, but then this current poll has shown that he has dropped a bit, and Dr. Bawumia has gone up a bit. But then again, it's clear from the polls throughout this year that the race is between Dr. Bawumia and the Kennedy Japan. So sometimes you might say it might lead to a runoff. And then according to the poll again, it's showing that even if it goes to a runoff, Dr. Bawumia will still overcome Kennedy Japan and become the flag bearer for the NPP.
Well, we'll see where the power lies come January 30. All right, so now the Ghana Revenue Authority has assured that small taxpayers and medium enterprises stand to benefit more from the new tax reform. According to the GRA, this is due to, well, we'll follow up with this story right after this break. We come your way with business.
Back to business here on JoyNews Today. My name is Winston Take. Now to our first business story. The Ghana Revenue Authority has assured that small taxpayers and medium enterprises stand to benefit more from the new tax reform. According to the GRA, this is due to the recoupling of some levies and abolishment of the flat rate scheme. Speaking to Joy Business on the reform, which has been approved for implementation from 1st January 2026, Commissioner for Domestic Tax Revenue Division, Dr. Martin Kobil Yamburija, explained that taxpayers will be paying a lesser amount as compared to the previous law.
So to the taxpayer, it is a benefit. Because prior to the new law, the GET fund and the National Health Insurance were decoupled. So what it means is that before you apply the VAT rate of 15%, you have to include the GET fund of 2.5 and the National Health Insurance levy of 2.5 before applying the VAT. So that would have given you a higher effective VAT rate. But we have recoupled it. That is to say that we have brought it back to where it was before. That means that the base on which the VAT will be calculated is the same base that you will now be calculating the GET fund and the National Health Insurance levy. So let's say if we take the base as 100, the GET fund of 2.5 will be calculated on the 100, the National Health Insurance levy of 2.5 will also be calculated on the 100, and the VAT will also be calculated on the 100. So what it implies is that the effective VAT rate will be lower than what it used to be. So it means that taxpayers ordinarily will be having to pay less than what they previously paid.
Meanwhile, the GRA believes that the new changes to the value-added tax law will help boost compliance.
We are very positive that it will drive compliance. Because one of the issues that people complained about the old law was the fact that there was a cascading effect in terms of the levies because it was inbuilt into the cost of the item. But now that taxpayers are allowed to claim it, then that cascading effect is no longer there. And therefore, people will now be more willing to comply in that whatever VAT that you pay, once you are not a final consumer, you have the opportunity to claim it. And therefore, it is not a cost to you. Unlike the previous, where those were part of your cost. Now it is no longer part of your cost, and therefore you can claim it. So our expectation is that we are going to have more people complying. That apart, the VAT threshold or the qualification to register for VAT has also been raised from 200,000 Ghana cedis per annum to 750,000 Ghana cedis. What that means is that small businesses that were hitherto required to register and charge VAT are now completely exempt. So in a way, a lot more people will not be charging a VAT in that regard. However, those who exceed the target or the threshold of 750,000 Ghana cedis will now have to charge. So in a way, we are also giving back something to the consumer, in that if you are buying from a small trader, you do not pay the VAT at all.
That's all for business. We have more news for you after this break. Stay tuned.